to the show with your friend and mine. So tell me, Dr. Squee, who's it gonna be this time? We like to hear you talk, but we love to hear you listen. And if you are not subscribed, you won't know what you're missing. So welcome to the Doctor Squee Show. Welcome to the Doctor Squee Show. Welcome to the Doctor Squee Show. Headphones up. Here we go.
Hello and welcome to the Doctor Squee Show. I'm Dr. Squee and this is my show. Now, tonight, I want to thank everyone for joining me. I know we've got a lot of people joining us online tonight. And also, of course, to those who are watching it back later. Just a quick note, for this edition of the Doctor Squee Show, it's brought to you in association with Retrek Podcasts, which you can find in video form on Facebook or wherever you get your podcasts. Please do put any questions you might have in the comments. I will try to include as many of them as I can. If I don't, it might be because me and Sid already discussed them on a previous chat we had, which you can find at youtube.com/Dr. Squee. All that said, please welcome an actor and director whose credits include 24, Gotham, Game of Thrones, and a little show you might have heard of called Star Trek: The Next Generation, which, by the way, I found out today, he is credited as soundtrack for because he sang for He's a Jolly Good Fellow and Jerusalem. So please welcome back to the Doctor Squee Show, Alexander Siddig.
Thank you.
Sid,
thanks very much.
How are you doing tonight?
Very good to see you. Very good. Very good. Thanks. All good. I'm in rainy Massachusetts at the moment, where I currently live with my lovely wife, and it's sort of middle of the day, but I can't wait for the evening.
Yep, and as a lapsed Englishman, you will know it's freezing here.
I'm a lapsed everything. It's freezing over there. Yeah, that's for sure. It's not too bad here. I think you said that you were right, by the way, that I was on The Next Generation, but Deep Space Nine was because I did one show.
Sorry, did I say Next Generation?
Yes, you did, but it was correct. So all the trivia guys out there will be like, yeah.
I was going deep cuts. You see, it's like everyone knows you for Deep Space Nine. Yeah, okay. Sorry about that.
That's all. It's a good show.
Yeah, it is, and as was, of course, Deep Space Nine. Now, Deep Space Nine in its 30th year now, which is incredible to believe, and indeed the month where it started. So, when you think about Deep Space Nine being 30, what's the first thing which brings to your mind?
It feels like yesterday. I mean, it's the feeling of arriving in Los Angeles on whatever it was, Tuesday morning or something. I packed my bags like a couple of days before. I'd been told I was leaving to go to Los Angeles only a few days before that. And such is the speed of casting and the beginning of the actual event in Hollywood. It was a kind of whirlwind. So I arrived, and I can remember it like it was yesterday in West Hollywood with these kind of alien bars to me. They're kind of crazy bars and a really thriving gay scene, which I'd just never seen before. And it was just like a leaving the planet. And then, of course, the studio and being terrified and lining up for photographs and talking to a million journalists, all things no one is trained to do. So 30 years ago, I just think, gosh, how time flies. How amazing is that? I must be a lot older, but I don't really feel it yet.
So it's ironic. You actually felt more alien there than I think Dr. Bashir did at the beginning of the show.
Oh, yes. I mean, I took that right out of my own playbook. I mean, arriving in Los Angeles in '92, the Crenshaw Boulevard, there was still smoldering embers, smoke rising in the air because there'd been a riot a month before. And it was a huge deal, the LA riots at that time. And I think Blair was yet to get in and Clinton had just got in. It was a very weird time. Everything was changing. Everything was different.
Oh, thank God everything's settled down since then.
Oh, yeah, now everything's just normal.
It's just all calm, isn't it? I think last time we were speaking was during the pandemic. So.
I know, gosh.
And look, you were hiding your light under the bushel then. I jokingly asked you if you had any kind of cure for COVID being in Starfleet Medical, and it was nearly a year later we got the vaccine. So you're right on it.
I was a bit slow. Sorry about that. I had trouble with some of the widgets and the gadgets.
So of course, like one of the and sorry, just very quickly, there's a few questions which have been provided by people. I will credit them, but someone who helped me write these questions was my friend James from Retrek. So just a big thanks to him.
Nice, James. Thank you.
Thank you. The relationship between Bashir and O'Brien is one of the best ever in television, like the best male friendships, I think. Cool. Way ahead of even the term bromance. Did you realize at the time it was something special? And did you hang out between the times to kind of help foster that kind of relationship?
We did hang out. We would go to Los Angeles bars. Colin really liked a drink. Not too much, but he did like to go out to drink, and he didn't like to socialize at least with me in other ways. I would prefer to go to dinner, but he'd like to go to a bar, and that, which is kind of a very O'Brien thing, and probably a Bashir thing too, weirdly. But I think that we're looking, it was a lucky happenstance, that whole thing, because I think originally they wanted Bashir to fall in love with Dax, Terry Farrell's Dax, Jadzia. Yes. And for some reason, there just was a kind of chemical resistance to that. And it just never got off the ground. And so it became about not getting together with Jadzia for a while. And then I think the writers just went, you know what, it's all a bit trite. This is too obvious, too normal. Let's do something else. Let's do something that isn't necessarily romantic. And two very important relationships emerged from that, and that was Bashir's relationship with Garak, Andy Robinson, which is kind of, for me, to change the way I approach the character, changed everything about how that character should exist. And Chief O'Brien, which was, a kind of cheeky nod to the Next Generation, weirdly, because that was a more kind of, I think it was a more, I don't know what to say. I don't like using the word normal, but it was a sort of more normal relationship. I'm going to use it. I can't think of a better word.
Traditional?
Right. Traditional is much better. Thank you. It's because I keep getting my hand slapped for using the word normal, and I probably shouldn't.
Oh, it's so difficult. I think where we were so ingrained in certain terminology, which now has evolved, and it should do, it's very hard to break that.
It's also the lack of, severe lack of vocabulary. I couldn't get to the word traditional in time. So so there was a kind of two kinds of relationship happening there for me, for Dr. Bashir, and for me, which were just foundational. And obviously the O'Brien relationship was playing darts and then consoling each other after a terrible day, and all that sort of bromance.
Yeah, and I think when you mentioned the relationship with Garak, for me, I think it was like Garak saw what Bashir became eventually. Like he was this sort of, like, it seemed this very young, very enthusiastic, whip behind the ear doctor, but it's almost like Garak could see something more in him, and it's funny how that kind of played out as it went.
Oh, Garak had way more information about me than I did. One of those people who knows you better than you do, and it's kind of terrifying. But yes, any predictions that he may have made definitely came true, especially about the character Bashir, and also the change in him, the kind of growing up moment. Growing up several years, not just a moment, but he did become more steely and more socially competent, for want of a better way of putting it.
There was a question from Brian Bartlett. Hi, Brian.
Hello, Brian.
I really wish I was there for that little prank Colm Meaney pulled on you, going into a bar and ordering a beer. Can you remember the story behind that? This is not one I've heard before.
Oh, yeah. This is obviously a true story.
Fits in with the bar theme.
I'm going to try and remember the bar. Anyway, it was the end of my street. It was a famous Irish bar in Los Angeles, and I was on a street called North Gardner Street. So if you want to look it up, at the end of North Gardner Street is this famous bar, Irish bar, and it's been 30 years, so I can't remember it. But I do remember the incident, and I went in with Colin. We sat down, and I said, "I'll get the drinks." And so I went up to the bar, and the barman said, "We don't serve your kind here." And okay. So I walked back to Column and I said, look, a bit of a problem. I think the barman's like racist. So I don't think he doesn't want a person of color to serve a person of color. And Colin said, don't be a daft idiot. He doesn't like you because you're English, not because you're. That is a true story. It actually happened.
Oh, wonderful! I love that.
I've never been served a drink because from my nationality, at least part of my nationality.
Just quick shout out to Nikita Davis, who's asked about fan fiction. We sort of covered that in the other interview, so please do check that out. I'm not going to argue. But yeah, the one of the other important relationships you've already mentioned is that with Bashir and Dax. So obviously you have the two Daxes as well. How did you how was it your working relationship with each of them? And did you think it was did you enjoy the storyline where they fell in love at the end, or did that feel a bit consolation prize-ish? It's yeah, I don't know. How did you feel?
Think so. I mean, I thought Esri was pretty great. So, and
oh, no one's selling Esri, but that story
as well as the joint first prizes. No.
Oh, sorry, not like that. Just sorry. I would like to. It's like, just trying to slightly reword my question. Sorry, where Bashir had not been very lucky with Jetsia, for him having a sort of another.
I completely know what I'm just teasing you. Look,
I'm just going to keep on digging this hole here. It's fine.
Right here on your podcast. No, first part of the question. I got on incredibly well with Terry Farrell.
Yes,
we were very close. We'd hang out together, New Year's, Christmas, you name it. We'd be around each other's houses, and we still to this day are great friends. I didn't get to know as well the second Dax, my consolation prize.
I'm not going to let that one down in a hurry, am I?
Nikki and I hadn't known each other very long, and she came very late into the series, so I didn't get that head of steam, and we didn't have this evolving, not romance that we kept on talking about on the phone when we got the scripts. It's like, we're not together. No, we're not. It seems to be all about the fact that we're not going to get together. And then Worf arrived, so it was it was actually correct. I think that was the correct decision. I thought it was a really good at the time. To give people some context, television in Los Angeles, it was some great TV. I mean, things were beginning, but it was pretty much same old. It was the end of the same old era where just networks just pumped out shows that they knew audiences would appreciate. And so there were shows, I don't want to disrespect them too much, but I didn't like them. There were shows like 90210 was a show, which is sort of a kind of teenage clothes on Baywatch. And there was a show called Melrose Place. And they all had these archetypal young kids, beautiful, skinny, muscular, all the right bits and pieces hanging off them. And we were headed in that direction, I felt. So I didn't want to be archetypal. And so it was really cool not to not get the girl. And actually live up to that was pretty much that was interesting to me. And also it mirrored my life. I was never a hunk, I was never the dude who could get a girl. It was not me. That wasn't the me thing. I remember we're going on a holiday to Greece, and I was so not in with my mate at the time, a good friend of mine, and we were kids. I was probably 20, and you just have 10 pounds a day to spend or whatever it is, and you just find a way to save enough money to get drunk, fall asleep on the beach, wake up, repeat, and that was a kind of ideal holiday for some reason at the time. And he was always on the search for a romantic liaison, for want of a better way of putting it. And I could not get involved. He once got me a partner for the evening, just for, talk, obviously, but I couldn't do it. Couldn't manage it. So that was very Bashir. And I don't know how the writers noticed that I was so pathetic.
I think you got the last laugh on that one anyway. But it's, I mean, for you, did it? You know, it must have been so strange then to then be seen as like you have been touted as a sex symbol, and you know you're extremely handsome man, sir. Even if I do say so myself, and
Thank
it's
you.
you know that must be a strange feeling to someone who grew up not feeling like that.
Yeah, and it's still a strange feeling. I don't think, I mean, I just don't believe it. I mean, I think that it's just sort of press. And I think it's someone's whispered in someone's ear to say it. And
Oh,
often that's how the whole thing begins. The whole process begins. People find I mean, the beautiful thing about being attractive is that you don't have to look like me, and you don't have to look like, you know, Jason Priestley, and you don't have to look like any of the people on any of the TV shows. Attraction comes out of a weird magical alchemy that happens between two people, and TV often gets it wrong, and everybody tends to look the same, you know, the actor bodies. And I think if we'd had a bit more freedom, a bit more time, we could have explored that more in Deep Space Nine. But we did explore that notion, and it has been explored since the original series, you know, with various shows and unlikely people getting together, which is one of the strengths of Star Trek. And the only way you can talk about it is through sci-fi or fantasy.
That's brilliant. We've got a question. It's about the artwork, the new artwork. Is this something you've been working on?
Yes, I think if I know what they're referring to.
We've had a few similar questions, so there's
Yes, I think I don't think it's anything behind me, or maybe it is. I'm not sure.
Has anyone got any more detail on the artwork?
It's a little bit vague.
Look, I'm just saying the people have spoken. No, Sid, you're actually very handsome.
Someone said that. Yeah. I just managed, even with my terrible eyesight, without my glasses on, I managed to read one of the comments that popped up. I normally try and avoid them, but they pop up. So yes. Thank you.
Look, the art project that they mean.
Yes,
the
I'll tell you what it was.
There
There's several art projects going on because I live in art projects, basically. So what we've got behind me are, oh wait, so you can actually see all of it. There is a beautiful embroidered, whatever that is called, thing from South Africa. And that's basically the story of women in villages in South Africa made these embroideries to sell and, you know, make a little bit of money for themselves. And I just loved them, and I could only afford one, but I got one. And that is a shield from a tribe in one of the Dakotas. I'm told, because I believe everything I'm told by the person selling it to me. And I bought it in Rapid City, and she said that it belongs to the Rotten Belly, and the Rotten Belly in this particular indigenous culture, their job was to just do everything badly, wrong, so their children could see exemplified what wrong is. And I love that idea. And then a chalk by my little boy. He was 7 or 6 at the time. So that is the. Oh, what's that? Oh no, I can't. That's on your wall. I saw a thing on your wall. I was like, "Where's that?"
That's the Enterprises and Deep Space Nine, and I think Voyager up there. And that's the different shows I've been on. So,
brilliant.
If anyone cared.
Oh, we all do.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much to the two Mels for those questions or that question.
Thank you for sorting me out there, Mel.
Yeah, definitely. There was one episode which is kind of interesting because my friend James came up with some of these questions, and he asked about the augments from the perspective of a lot of people who are trans saw themselves in that, because like you going from Jules to Julian and kind of the changes which happened to Bashir. To me, actually, through the storylines of the augments who'd been isolated and through Julian's story, it brought to mind to me about neurodiversity, which is something which has been like in the days of Deep Space Nine, autism was just starting to be talked about more in the media, I felt, and it's just expanded from then. I'm actually in the process of hopefully getting diagnosed with ADHD myself. So I'm kind of particularly seeing it in media now. But with those two groups, was that either of those anything that was discussed when you were looking at that storyline at the time?
No, I mean, I think it's beautiful that people find what they find, and I think art is it's really important that art is as neutral as possible, but as a generous and allowing as possible to allow people to find what they need along its aisles. But I don't think that the trans is obviously around, has been for hundreds of years, but the political dialogue hadn't begun in the early 90s.
Exactly.
And there certainly wasn't a sense of social responsibility taken on by television shows and writers, and generally the arts community hadn't started taking it on in an overt way. So at a Hollywood level. So I think it's a beautiful accident that happened. And I think it's great. At the time, I was really irritated because it came out of left field, and I did not know if that's such a big change to your. I mean, your character. Yes. You have a bit of time to prepare that, come up with something for that. But they just told me on a Thursday, and we delivered on Monday. So I was irritated for that reason. But looking back on it, it has had a lot of beautiful ripples.
Yeah, I mean, it's, as I say, it's like, again, I think now, obviously, for obvious reasons, I'm looking for more archetypes of people in neurodiverse, but it's like that is one which is particularly strong. And someone else has said that Steffi Parker has put, with the augment stuff, I saw it as an artistic story like Squee, just saying. So it is just wonderful to feel that representation in there. So even if it wasn't intended, I thank you.
You're South Wales. You should read Belinda Bauer, who's a Cardiff resident. Has wrote a novel quite a few years ago now called Rubbernecker, about with a neurodiverse hero. It's a fantastic book, a fantastic read, and I highly recommend it to anyone who's interested. It's not about South Wales, although the Brecon Beacons are a huge part of it. It's a wonderful, wonderful book.
Well, for reasons which don't need exploring, I'm actually in Southampton. I saw Henri Welsh through my radio show going up there.
Oh, okay, cool.
but absolutely love it up there, and I will check out that book. Thank you. Nikita Davis, please ask if he's going to do any more audio plays with the wonderful Andrew Robinson. Thank you from Sydney, Australia.
If I'm invited, Andy is probably one of my closest friends in the world, so I never have any trouble picking up the blower and talking to him, and getting on Zoom and doing a little bit of that. Hopefully we can do something in person one day, because we now live at sort of diametrically opposed ends of the United States. He's in Los Angeles and I'm way up in the Northeast. So yes is the answer if we can get our act together.
Oh, this is one which I think we can expand out to a few bits, actually, because it's from JK Barber 99. I'm interested in the way I see a subtle difference in changing Bashir being acted versus human Bashir. What is your methodology for playing them different, if any? And I would actually expand that to, you had a few times when you were taken over during Deep Space Nine in different seasons. So how do you kind of like push yourself into that different area?
It's kind of it's just an acting challenge, isn't it? I mean, you can't go, crazy. You can't just be completely different, because very few people can be completely different. So you sort of try and find ways to be subtly different. But to be honest, I'd only really been, I didn't start my career I went to acting school, but I started my career as a director, and really sort of fell into acting. So I was probably in only my second year of professional acting at that point, and I had a lot to learn, and so I probably wasn't quite good enough to pull off all the differences that I would have loved to have pulled off, because I just didn't have the competence. And if I could go back and nail that accent and get that thing right and be a bit stronger here, I would do it. I wrote in a Sharpie on my dressing room door, which is just as a trailer, voice, because I had quite a high-pitched voice back then. And so I concentrated on getting it as low as I could and sounding more masculine. Sort of a few things I could do. And I realized, I understood how limited I was as an actor, and worked very hard to try and improve. And so looking back at it, I could have done a better job at some of those things. But that was the, we all, I mean, the good thing about doing a TV series like Star Trek, which is uncancelable, well, at least most of them are uncancelable. Although they kind of wanted to fire me for the first 3 years. And thank God, Rick Berman, the executive producer, just kept saying, no, he's staying. But you can make mistakes. You can be not quite as good as you should be. And it's a great university. So I am as grateful as I am for all the adventures that I had in Los Angeles, and for the work and the beauty of Deep Space Nine, which I think is one of the most beautiful gestures as a television show. Mm. I'm particularly grateful to have been educated there.
Yeah, and it sort of like plays again that parallel thing of your journey along with Bashir. So it was all about him being young and fresh faced, and then maturing as the series went on. So
yeah.
Steffi has put, now that you mentioned Sid, any advice for new actors, if any?
You are going to fail. You are going to fail, and it's about your ability to cope with that failure. That is going to make you a survivor. Obviously, you've got to work hard. Obviously, you've got to be talented. But unless you dare to fail, you're going to be in trouble. So you always want to find some places, safer places, if you can, to just begin. A great thing is like Fringe in London, or in Cardiff, wherever you are, Southampton. But just a stage where you are expected to concentrate and learn your lines and get through a play or a scene, even. And if you don't want to do any stage work, then you have to get it together with friends to do scenes on film, just using your iPhone, and just study, work it out, critique each other, because and get some of the things wrong, because you don't get many opportunities to fail once you start. The press are brutal. They will chop you down. We did a show called Chantaram, which was actually not a bad show last year, but it got such brutal press that I guess it eventually got cancelled. So they can be terrifying. So you want to just learn to say the truth and get some of your screw ups out of the way, get out of your own way. That's a very long-winded answer.
I'm just trying to find another question which we did get in the meantime, but it was
I see it right there under the table, just by your left foot.
It was about if there was a really good other Star Trek script, is that something you would like to return to? And I know it was from Marilyn Lombardi, but I can't
thank you.
Oh, here we go. There we go.
Thanks, Marilyn. If obviously I love the character, I love the ideas behind the show. I love, and if there was something that expanded our knowledge of him and my knowledge of him and everything else that you need to have a great show, is kind of got to be exciting and stuff like that. It would be terrific. Of course, no one would turn that down.
Do you think that Deep Space Nine is ripe for a comeback a la Picard?
I don't know. I mean, I still don't know. I mean, I know there's a lot of people who love that show, but I don't know the metrics. I don't know what the data analysts say. And I know that The Next Generation is still the most popular show. And Deep Space Nine might still be the most unpopular show. I don't know, but it was in the 90s. And it all boils down to the numbers, baby. If everybody wants to, if there's enough bums on seats, we're off. And if there aren't, then we're not, because these shows are very expensive, and no one's going to take any risks unless they. And also, there's something I would like to say about Star Wars as well. I think there's a risk although a lot of people enjoy a lot of different things all at the same time, this kind of very polyamorous situation. But there's a kind of saturation point where you go, oh my God, there's an 8th show about this, and there's a 19th show about this, all at the same time, all on different, in this sort of contemporaneous to each other, and it's a little bit worrying. That would frighten me if for a show, a Deep Space Nine revisit, is that, would this be the one that broke the camel's back?
I mean, the one thing I would say is that because the way Deep Space Nine was so ahead of the curve with serialized stories as opposed to standalone, I think it seems to be getting a renaissance on Netflix. I don't see the figures or anything, but like there's a lot more talk about it, a lot more people, I think, still discovering it. So I think it's I think it's found its moment maybe at the moment.
Love that. I'm told it hasn't dated terribly. I mean, there's going to be some cheese, but certainly the stories and the ideas and the characters are stand up very well even today.
I'm going to pair a question from the Legend of the Traveling TARDIS with one of my own. So he's asked about, are you ready to apply for the 16th Doctor? Would you like to play Doctor Who? And if there was another part you could bring back and play from kind of over TV, what would it be?
Of shows of characters I've played, would I like to play?
No, just like any show. If they were bringing it back and they wanted, like, what, if you wanted to play a character you haven't played before.
Oh wow! Well, I mean, Doctor Who is obviously legendary. I don't know. There comes a point where you can't really have a 50, whatever, 8, 7, 9 years old.
Oldie?
Yeah, it's pretty old. And he, I remember watching John Pertwee, and I think he was probably in his 30s. He looked like 100. He looked like he was 150, the oldest Doctor Who ever. And then Tom Baker was a young'un, and I think they like their youth, to play these characters because they try and appeal to the YA crowd as well as everybody else. But obviously, great fun part. I would be kind of interested in playing his companion or her companion. That would be kind of a cool role to play. I think that would be fun. I think it's totally okay to have a wrinkled up old thing be a companion. It's just like a nice, and then so that in terms of roles, it's a difficult question, especially if you're not white. And I don't mean to say that accuse anybody of anything here. This is simply the fact of the matter. There are lots of roles I'd love to play.
Yeah.
I simply can't. I simply could just be wrong, inappropriate. I might have a really great spin on Winston Churchill, for example. It's like, nah, mate, you're not going to play Winston. Not going to happen. Not in a million years. So it's a really difficult question to ask because a lot of characters are just out of reach, and it's very limiting to suggest the ones that are. So I think the ones that haven't been written yet are the most exciting because that's a world of imagination that is not. There's no closed door to me. I can't. I don't have to worry if I can't play one of the heroes of history. I always have had trouble with that question, partly because it's a long corridor with a bunch of closed doors.
No, that's a really great answer. Francois Gervais has did say that if there was ever a Short Circuit remake, I'd cast Sid for the role of Ben the Science Guy. I mean, you talk about roles which might not have been wise for a white person to play then. When you talk about ethnic specific casting, I think they might have made a slight mistake in Short Circuit too. But anyway, I digress. Deep Space Nine was, of course, as we've mentioned, known for dealing with loads of complex issues, loads of real world issues. Was there kind of a favorite storyline along those lines that you enjoyed?
Yeah, there was. It's a two-parter, and I'm forgetting the name right now.
Sure, if you describe it, we've got an audience full of people.
It was, I mean, ostensibly, it was about homelessness.
When they travel back to past tense.
Yeah, past tense 1 and 2.
Yeah.
It wasn't ostensibly about homelessness, but about this disparity, about inequality. There were so many shows, and the writers were really subtle about how they expressed themselves. So you wouldn't immediately notice what their theme was. And you would, only in retrospect, you would go, oh, that's about race. Oh my goodness, that's about, love. Well, everything's about love. But I think there are things that I was really interested in that weren't really show specific, because I was there the whole kind of over, although I didn't watch it many episodes, even to this day. I maybe have seen maybe 5 or 6. But I read every script, so I knew kind of where we were headed. And they were the first. Well, they weren't the first, but they certainly were the most interesting, in the sense that they allowed the Federation to be really unpleasant as well as really great. And I don't know if you know, but at the time there were wars in the Baltics, and there was real problems around the world, and Islamic terrorism was raising its head, just beginning to raise its vicious head, and a whole bunch of things were happening, and the UN was suddenly calling the shots on all sorts of things, and they were squabbling with each other. And they made a really direct correlation between the United Nations and the Federation and what that looked like. And that was a really interesting thing to me, because I had never seen that it wasn't a kind of monolith federation. It was full of all kinds of interesting people, good and bad. And I think that they could have gone further with that. I'm really interested to explore a lot more of that. I know that some movies did since then, and I'm sure shows have now recently, but at that time it was quite groundbreaking.
Yeah, when you say about the homelessness story, I think what really was so impactful about that two-parter was that where they'd gone back in time, it was not so long forward from our time now. And it's something which Picard actually picked up on in this last series. They went to sort of the same time as that episode was set. And so they got to explore that a bit more. So I think the fact that, it's like it's not a far-flung future problem. This is our problem right now. If we
And then there's Far Beyond the Stars. I mean, there's a bunch of really interesting shows, and sprinkled amongst them are just shows. Just leave your brain at the door and have fun, which is really essential ingredient to Star Trek as well.
Definitely. Sandy, not oil. Sid, did you you started directing? So would you like to do more of it?
I would. I'm not sure I have the courage, but I would. If I can write a story, then I might. I don't know how else I would start. I did do a couple of Star Treks, which I thoroughly enjoyed the first time, and the second time I was like, wow, I'm doing the same old thing. And the way TV directing used to work, it doesn't anymore. Because it's much more movie-like now. They only shoot 12 episodes a year or 8 episodes a year. In those days, we would shoot 24 episodes, knock them out. So you had 7 working days to shoot your whole episode. And so you just did a lot of work to make sure everything was in the right place, and push the button and off you go. But to do it now without being a director for such a long time would take a lot of courage. So I would have to come up with my own story for that to work out, I think.
We got our fingers crossed to see that one happen at some point. There was one which my friend James asked about, which was in the episode Storyteller. You had to eat a painful number of limes. Do you recall that at all?
A kiwi fruits.
Oh, was it kiwi fruit?
They look like limes, but they were kiwi fruits.
Right, that's a lot nicer.
It's a lot nicer. And they may be supposed to be limes, and they just gave me kiwi fruits, so they'll never know. But it actually burnt the first layer off my tongue because there was so much acid, even in kiwi fruits.
Thank God it wasn't limes then.
It just took my tongue off. So I was like, couldn't touch the roof of my mouth for about 2 weeks after that. And I learned a lesson. Pretend to eat fruit. Don't eat the fruit.
Marilyn, again, are you still doing conventions? And if so, where are you going to next?
I hope if my schedule allows, I am going to be in Philadelphia with the Gays in Space.
Nice.
I think they're going to do a convention in Philly.
Brilliant. So you've got numerous stories which revolve around Bashir after the end of Deep Space Nine in novels.
Yes.
Have you read any, and where, and are there any favorites of yours?
I loved Andy's A Stitch in Time. I know it's about Garak, but it involves Bashir quite heavily. And that is my favorite. There's a lot of fan stuff that I've been introduced in just in the last couple of years.
Yeah, you did quite a bit on Sid City during lockdown.
Yeah, there was a lot, and some wonderful ideas came out of people. So I've enjoyed that, but they've been quite small scale events. But I know that a lot of people have written some wonderful things. I just don't have time to read them, really. And there was a huge lot of Bashir Garak stories, not all family friendly, going around in the 90s. They were an obsession for a lot of people for a while. So yeah, I love the fact that it generates a whole subculture of different, angles and distractions and destinations for people. It's really creative, and it shows how viral real creativity is. And
you mentioned Stitch in Time there. Am I correct in saying Andy's working on the audio of it now?
He's making an audiobook. Absolutely.
After all this time. That's wonderful.
Absolutely. Finally got the go-ahead.
Brilliant. That's really exciting. And I mentioned Sid City there. For anyone who doesn't know, please do check it out. It's Sid's home online, where he shares so much stuff. And I love the direct relationship you have with your fans. And actually, that's something I did want to ask you about.
Lovely.
Why is that so important to you? And and just thank you, I guess, for being so giving with your time to the fans.
I don't think at the beginning it felt like that's what it was, but within about 3 or 4 weeks, it wasn't that. I mean, Mel and I were kind of surprised by how delightful it was. It was a pretty gloomy time. I don't know if you remember, a couple of years ago, April. COVID had just shot off the start line and raced into the world, shouting at everybody and sneezing on everything. And we just got a group of people, about a few hundred people, who would rotate in and out of our chats, and it was something I really ended up looking forward to, really enjoying. And I'm really glad we did that. It was a lot of people made a lot of friends, myself included. And I also got to understand about things I just never thought about before. Types, archetypes, people, the sheer variety, the sincerity. So it was really cool.
Brilliant. And I do love, from the What We Leave Behind documentary, which I really enjoyed as well. There was a couple of the directing notes from Avery Brooks, which sounded pretty interesting, such as just glide through the sleam and just slalom. What was it like being directed by him? And are there any kind of directions like that you particularly remember?
I think he was one of the 2 or 3 best directors in the whole of our 7 years. He was a really, really good director, really understood what he needed to get done, and wasn't intimidated by 300 people all turning around to him and go, "What next?" And we had a kind of unusual relationship for many reasons, some of which I can't really go into, but one or two of them are that I was born in Africa, and he liked that about me, and he would share with me terrific writers. I was Cornel West back in those days. He'd give me, the first thing he gave me was this book called Race Matters, and then I had to read it, and then we had to talk about it. There will be a test, so this wasn't just a casual gift. He was incredibly intimidating when he wanted to be, and incredibly friendly and nurturing when he wanted to be. Mercurial in that way. He loved Cirroc Lofton as a son, and was a militant African-American man who had been through some of the worst, discriminatory behavior on a societal level that anyone alive has been through. So he could be grumpy. Sometimes you push the wrong button, he would grump out. And when he raised his voice and when he came at you, man, I mean, he's like, whoa, 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 whoa. So, I mean, everybody did what they were told. He was terrific. He garnered a lot of respect, let's put it that way.
And just to share the link for Gaze in Space. So gazeinspace.org for all the info about their convention. So thank you very much, Melissa Lowry. We've got...
Thanks, Mel.
Say it again?
I just said thanks, Mel.
Oh, pardon. Of course, in Our Man Bashir, you got to play a sort of version of James Bond. How fun was that? And was your favorite thing to play that or the more sinister spy of the Section 31 world?
I loved playing the James Bond spoof because that was the first time that kind of thing had happened. That I realized that Bashir had a fantasy world, a life, and James Bond was kind of perfect. And also, I think I was beginning to fall in love with Nana Visitor at the time, so that was quite handy. That was pretty useful to spend loads of time doing really cool scenes with her. I'm pretty sure that was the time, and I might have done it, but I don't know. But it was great to do that with Nana.
I think it would have been.
Yeah, that sort of area. I prefer the Section 31 Bashir because that's much more ambiguous, much more complicated, much more dangerous than Bond, who is like, got a Beretta in my heel and I'll shake it and I'll stir it, please, and all that stuff. And it's quite easy to spoof that. But doing the later stuff, there's no accessorizing girls hanging off your shoulder, and there's none of the kind of the glitz of Bond, and spy work is a very dirty, unpleasant business, and that's a very real politic way of looking at it. So that would be kind of interesting to see a bit more of that.
Right. Mel's also shared there's also a link, youtube.com. You can look it up. There's an excerpt of you and Andrew reading an excerpt from Stitch in Time. So
we just the other day. I read it like a couple of days ago.
Oh, brilliant. Are you going to feature in the audio at all?
I think not. I think it's going to be his book. I mean, I think people would be lovely to get a whole cast of characters to do it, but then it's a play on book and not an audio, not an audio book. And it's such a pleasure to listen to the author read their own work, especially when the author knows how to read. The amount of times you hear a book on tape and the author it's like, oh, you don't read often aloud, do you? That's not one of your things, is it? You're a wonderful writer, but you shouldn't be reading it aloud. So it's great to hear Andy do it.
Actually, I think he had a little bit of a head start when you were reading the fan fiction during lockdown, because you guys I think were mainly sight reading it, so every now and again you'd have a little pause. Whereas where he was playing Garrick, any pause just sounded perfectly Garrick because he wasn't.
Exactly. Whereas Bashir can't do that because Bashir talks really fast when he wants to. He's really rabbiting along. He's like, oh my goodness, okay.
Kath Harper, I'm going to slightly reword this. She's put, do you ever come to the UK? When are you going to come back to the UK, sir?
I was in the UK just a few months ago on my way to Hungary. So I stayed a week. I don't even have, I share a house with my brother, and there is no room for me. There's no room for me in that house. He has got a beautiful family with 2 great kids and a fantastic wife, and renting out lots of spaces in the house. So I was like, I'll stay in a hotel then, right? Okay, all right. I'll just be around the corner in the hotel. And so I stayed at a very nice hotel, and it was actually delightful. And it would be pointless keeping a room for me because I'm really very rarely there. I don't believe in taking a flight just to say hi, because that's just a waste of money and all sorts of fuel and all sorts of other things. So if I'm on my way somewhere, to get that somewhere, and I will always stop in England if I can. Otherwise, I'm stuck here with my wife.
Just to address one question, Sam Oil, I love how nonplussed Dr. Squee's dog is. Does she not realize there's a major star on the computer screen? You see, this is my producer here, Dottie, and actually you can't see the other dog, but somewhere behind me there is Willow as well. But yeah,
they've seen it all before, mate. They've seen it all before. All these la-di-da people traipsing onto the camera.
I'll have you know, they've made barks and noises in the background of interviews with the biggest stars in the world. I love this question. Teddy Faubert, Sid, I captured a screenshot from the Deep Space Nine episode Inquisition, in which you're walking away from Sloane. You stick out your middle finger on a console as you walk away. Was that intentional?
That's very good. That's very funny. I don't recall, but that is very funny.
That's a great fan question. Trials and Tribulation. How was that to film? Was it difficult where so much was added in later and there was so much?
It was great. I mean, we did all that nonsense all the time. So green screens, stop motion. I mean, you know, not stop motion, that would be weird, but camera locking. We did a lot of that kind of visual effects work. It was the early days of green screen, so it really was like huge, you know, big event to get wheel on this big green screen and start the whole thing, and had the camera which had to do exactly the same shot every time. So it was on a robot that moved in exactly the same place every time. So you just repeat the shot and repeat the shot with you in it, repeat the shot without you. So doing Trials and Tribulations was, that bit was really easy. I mean, the complicated bit was doing justice to the original show, because that was such an amazing show. And all those actors, a lot of those actors came to see us, you know. A whole bunch of them came down there. And they would be watching every step we made. And of course, that was just really nerve-wracking. You know, you got Walter Koenig just hanging out, just watching. Wow. Is this going to be any good in a minute? This is a really, really good day, but it was fun. It was a fun show. I really enjoyed doing that show. I watched that show. I made a point of watching that show. It was because O'Brien and I were up to our usual hijinks.
I mean, literally at that time, to have you lined up next to the original crew members, you just could not see the seams at all. So
no, it was very cool.
The only thing I think which has equaled that, which was a few years later, but Orphan Black I've been watching back, and that's got the same actor playing like about 6 different clones of herself, and yeah. But anyway, I digress. Episodes, there's a few episodes where I want to do a little speed round, just any remembrances you might have from these episodes. The much vaunted Move Along Home.
Oh yeah, nightmare. It's a recurring nightmare. That's what I'm going to use that word again. Nightmare.
let out, man. This is a safe space. Armageddon Game, a great one with.
I don't remember what happened. What happened in that Armageddon Game?
That was the one where you and Colm have to escape across a planet. You've just come up with a cure to some sort.
Oh yeah. That was kind of cool. I remember that. Yeah, that was cool. We kind of hung out in a kind of burned out silo on a devastated, war-torn planet. I do remember that. It was great fun. It was the first time that we properly worked together, like a show dedicated to our existence. It was great fun.
Melora, so that was with Daphne Ashbrook.
Love Melora, love Daphne, and I thought it was a great show. We got
The Wire, which was, of course, just wonderful to speak about addiction and everything, and a great show for you and Garrick.
That was the kind of apotheosis of our relationship. That was you know, can you save my life moment, and that's the sort of a growing moment for Bashir.
Hippocratic Oath, which I think was one of the first ones where we saw like really grown up Bashir. I don't know how else to put it.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, Hippocratic Oath was the one where he really screwed up, didn't he? So
yeah,
and I just love that, you know, because no one screws up.
yeah.
And he just nearly killed a whole bunch of people, or killed a whole bunch of people. Doctors get it wrong.
Well, that was the one with the Jem'Hadar, and it was the Quickening was the other one where it was on the planet. And
Quickening was the one he got it wrong.
yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. I don't remember the Jem'Hadar one. We used to call them jam jars.
The Quickening, I thought the genius about that episode particularly is it was like Bashir's whole arc in one episode. So the beginning of it, he was talking, it was almost like, you know, they've written it to be the Bashir at the beginning of the series. So you're very ebullient, very like, oh, I can't wait to get down to this planet. And then you see this play just running roughshod. And by the end of it, it's like the character's aged years.
Ah, yes. I thought that was called Distant Voices in my head.
That was the one where he was, he thought he was aging. He was literally aging.
Okay, right, yeah. So one, he matured, and the other one,
sorry, pardon me. Metaphorically, it seemed like he aged.
Yeah, I have so much trouble remembering these. So you said this is a quick fire round, right?
Yeah, that's fine.
I just don't remember what happens in all the episodes.
That's absolutely fine. And I love the Move Along Home is just nightmare. You mentioned your relationship with Nana. How was it, you know, having a relationship, filming at the same time as she was pregnant during it? How was it going through all that at the same time?
It was great. I mean, it was wonderful. We were very lucky. We were both working on a television show, so we were comfortably off. We had a nice house, and we could afford someone to look after the children if we both had to work. I don't think they were about to give anyone paternity leave or maternity leave for that matter. I remember actually the night Django was born, it was 11:17 in the evening. And the next morning at 6:45, I was on set. So that was kind of, well done, darling. I've got to go to work. Night at the hospital, sitting on an armchair by Nana's bed, and I think we had a pretty wonderful time. It wasn't awkward. There was no like, these two are together or anything. The people were very relaxed and about the whole situation, and obviously it was grand of the show to write Django into Deep Space Nine, even though he didn't get paid. And they even had a sense of humor when Nana gave birth about that. So all in all, everybody was very classy.
Brilliant. And just to round things off, what's coming up next for you? What are you about to start on? That's by Jodie Watts, my friend.
Hi, Jodie. There's a TV show called Fallen, which I just finished shooting, in fact. And it's based on a series of novels, I think. And it's ostensibly, I don't know what I'm supposed to say about it, to be honest. We haven't released any publicity, but it looks good. I don't really know.
So, any exclusives you want to drop?
Exactly. But because I don't even say that. I think I'm totally permitted to say it's been shot, and it's got a bunch of wonderful youngsters involved. And Sarah Niles, who you will remember from Ted Lasso, the therapist in Ted Lasso.
Oh my God, yeah.
Also in it, and it's rip roaring, fast paced series. So that's going to be 8 episodes at some point.
We just got one question. What genre can you say?
You probably, I mean, it's young adult is the genre, but it's a little bit, it goes out a little bit weird at times, and other times very real, and then it goes off and does its thing again. So there's a little bit of fantasy involved.
Well, I just want to finish things off by saying, first of all, James wanted me to point out that Bashir is his favorite character in Deep Space Nine.
Oh, thanks, James. Wish you were here, mate.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, I will give a shout out to him. Him and his brother are just seeing an ill family member, so we wish them all the best.
Absolutely.
My colleagues from Retrek there. But yeah, I think the wonderful thing about the Star Trek shows is they kind of mark time for a lot of us. So when I was watching the original series, I remember kind of it being on BBC Two and just catching it before I went off to the school disco because it was on at that time. And when I got to Deep Space Nine, I remember like that was more the age when I was a young adult. It was me and my friends, and my friend Steve would put round, and we'd have way too many bottles of cider, while we slipped on the latest VHS of Deep Space Nine and Voyager. And I just want to thank you for all those wonderful memories and all the time you've given by listening to you last time you spoke to me, and all the time you give to your fans. We all appreciate it.
Oh, thanks. You're welcome. It's always a pleasure.
I'm Dr. Squee. That was my show. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and thank you very much, Mr. Alexander Siddig.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, just before I leave, I just want to thank very much Mel, Sid's assistant, who helped set this up. And thank you to everyone again for watching. Good night. Or good day if you're in America.